Hello and welcome back to California Geology. So today I want to finish off the Sierra Nevada gold with hydraulic mining here. So by late 1850, people realized that the gold could also be found under the Table Mountain lavas in the older because remember the placer deposits were being exhausted. They were being the easy stuff getting from the riverbeds were being picked up pretty easily. But then they realized that there were older river deposits under these lava flows. Remember the inverted valleys in the Table Mountains? So these were now being drilled into. Some of the Cornish miners would actually dig tunnels over. There's a tunnel, a mine in Jamestown, where they were digging under these Table Mountains, extracting gold from these auriferous gravels that were under the Table Mountain lavas. But then by 1853, people realized that if you attached a nozzle to a high-powered hose here, what would happen is you could bring down a whole hillside and divert the water, this gravel, into these long toms or sluice boxes here, and then you could more efficiently extract gold there. So usually for a miner working a rocker or a long tom, they would mine maybe 1 to 4 yards per day, but with cubic yards per day. But using hydraulic mining, you can actually remove 50 to 100 cubic yards per day. So basically, what happened, it was really an ecological disaster where you're removing whole hillsides. And you'll read about it in Assembling California, how literally whole valleys were created where there were plains of these gravels. They were just removed. The gold was removed in the sluice boxes and the long toms here, but then everything else went right back to the river. And then eventually that went down the river valleys, and it ended up clogging rivers. It buried much of the San Francisco Bay marshes, and in fact, they estimated the San Francisco estuary has lost about 90% of its marshes, primarily from this silt and material coming down the San Joaquin River Delta. Captains navigating ships through the delta, well, they couldn't do it anymore. So, and also farmers, their fields were being overrun by silt. Ranchers or cows were getting stuck in the mud. So basically, there's a coalition that got together, headed by Woodruff here, and Edward Woodruff, and it was farmers, ranchers, ship captains from the San Francisco Bay region, and they had a lawsuit against the mining, and the miners were represented by the North Bloomfield Gravel Mining Company here. And in 1884, the Sawyer decision, the federal Ninth Circuit Court judge, basically prohibited dumping sediment into the rivers, which essentially stopped hydraulic mining, at least in the Sierra Nevada. Hydraulic mining actually continued up to about 1913 or so in the Trinity, the Klamath Mountains, up in the Trinity Alps, Klamath Mountains. But for the Sierra Nevada, it essentially stopped in 1844. So then other types of mining that has occurred to also is a lot of sediment has come down the rivers, and you can actually dredge the rivers and extract the gold that could be in there. So this is the dredger. So dredging is you extract sediment from the riverbed. You either use buckets, and then here there's a separation table here, or you can use suction. In fact, that's kind of small operations in the Sierra Nevada foothills still do this process here. So these are some mine dredgings from the Yuba River. This is over near Marysville, just north of Sacramento. And this is a pretty extensive region of mine tailings. There's a similar picture in your textbook that also shows these dredgings. Here's an example of a small operation where a couple of workers are having suction, where they're pulling up the black sands, which would have the heavier minerals, and the gold, bring it up to their gasoline-powered little flotation device here, and then they put it in this little sluice box here, where the lighter material, the silicate minerals, will wash away, and the gold would stick to the bottom here. So they have kind of a mini operation here. So that would be an example of suctioning. And here's a picture of one of those where here's a hose that they would use, right, to suction off the gold from the heavy sediment here. And then there's a little sluice box back in here. Now, in terms of production, yes, there was quite a bit of gold, and California is called the Golden State. Gold is a state mineral, right? However, if you added up all the money that was made, and $2 billion, well, that's quite a bit, especially when you're looking back to the late 1800s and early 1900s. But if you think about what the real gold in California, it's probably agriculture. In 1 year, the year 2000 here, 1 year of agriculture has made $10 billion, right? So there's the big trick there. And so the next topic I'm going to talk about here is the Central Valley of California and the riches that we find there as well.